Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. We got all sorts of people coming in now. If you've got a Bigfoot encounter story to share, go ahead, put it in the comments, or you can send me an email, bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Shep has one, it looks like. Let's look at Shep here. Shep's is in southeast Idaho. All right. Hey, Shep, thanks for coming up. Feel free to share what you experienced out there in southeast Idaho.
Okay. For starters, growing up, my dad worked for Department of Conservation in Illinois. So I grew up in the woods where I feel like it's my second home. And I met my now current fiance, and she lived in southeast Idaho, about 15 minutes away from Caribou National Forest, which is right down there, runs along the border with Utah, along Wyoming and Montana border. It's just a massive place. And so growing up, it's always been more of I didn't wonder if Bigfoot existed. I always believed it did. I saw firsthand how easy it'd be for a deer to hide in the woods and you not know it's there until you're on it. So it being possible is definitely on my radar. So we went up there and we started going out to Caribou National Forest, and I moved out there January 12th of 2022. And so we drive through the roads going up the mountain, and again, like I said, we're 15 minutes away from anywhere. And one of the first things I noticed was these footprints that kind of went sideways up the hill, like going at an angle upward, not straight up, but more like we would go up a hill in the snow. And I saw some snowshoe tracks, maybe 20 yards or so off from there. So that kind of stood out to me because these were different. And I wear a size 11 shoe. The footprints were about twice as wide as mine, and maybe my shoe size plus half my shoe size, again, long. So that was the first, okay, there's maybe something out here. And then we kept going out. One night, we were parked by this place called Cherry Springs, and Scout Mountain was up behind us. And we, at this point, started really looking for Bigfoot because I wanted to know for sure. And one night, my fiance goes, "Hey, I just want to see something," and turned around, faced up the mountain, and let out a whoop. And of course, we weren't expecting anything, but about a minute later, we got one back. And we just spun our head back, was like, "What was that?" Which, of course, anybody that's had any type of experience knows it becomes addicting at that point. You want to keep going. So one night we left the kiddo with the sitter and we went out to do night hiking. And it was full moon, snow on the ground. Of course, it just reflects. You can see forever without needing a flashlight or anything. We park and we're going along this trail side, and going in, we go through like this opening in the fence, and there's about 25 yards of just open flat land, and then there's a cliff face that is then, as you're going in, on the left side of the trail. So we're walking in along the cliff face, and we start to get to the trail line, and we just kind of start getting this really uneasy feeling. And so we decide, let's just turn around, trust our instinct. And as we're walking back out, I happened to look up the cliff face and just saw what looked like some sort of figure poking their head over and then pull back. And I did nonchalantly kept an eye on it, and about every minute or so, you would see it do it again. And my fiance, she goes, "What are you looking at?" I go, "Just nonchalantly, just look up at the top of the cliff." And we're walking, and I know she just glanced up. She goes, "What was that?" I go, "Exactly." I don't know, but we need to go. We're clearly being watched. So we left that area, went to another trailhead, and we're just sitting there in the car, unwrapping everything. The headlights were pointed down the trail into the trees. And she pointed out that there was red eye shine. And I'm like, oh, cool. And looked down. It was maybe 3 feet off the ground. I'm thinking, okay, it could be a fox. It could be a rabbit sitting on a rock. Could be any of these things. All of a sudden, it raised up to about 7.5 feet. And initially, I wanted to say it was an owl that flew up to a higher perch. But you kind of know it's not. So that was kind of what kept us going back. We'd go off the trailways and we'd find weird things. There was this, I don't want to call it a nest, but it was more like a shelter that easily could have been made by people. It had like branches stacked vertically around like this bramble bush. And when you went around the backside, you could see where different areas had been cleared out. And there was like a plank of wood sitting on top of rocks, and it very much looked human until I got to the one side of it where there was a deer carcass. It was just in pieces. There were bones everywhere. One of the bones looked like it had been clean broken, not cut, not chewed on. And anybody that has ever done any hunting in a place where you got bears, you got wolves, you got predators, you're not going to have your kill in your campsite. You are not. You are asking for trouble, especially a place where there's one way in and one way out. You're cornered. You're not going to do it. So that kind of just struck me as weird. And so then it was probably, I want to say, March of 2022. And we went down to the same place, and we were parked and had the headlights shining down this path where about 50 yards down the path, there's a creek that runs through there. And we're sitting there and we hear a mountain lion down by the stream. And we can hear it going from what would be our left to our right. It's far enough away that we're not really that worried about it, but we've been out there enough that we have bear spray, we have machetes, we have lights, we have walking sticks, everything but a firearm. You don't go out there stupidly. We have a way to somewhat protect ourselves. So we're just not thinking anything of it, listening to it, and all of a sudden it goes and just takes off running. So I go, something scared it. And Anya told me to be quiet because she could hear something. When I listened, you could hear something walking through the stream. And so my first thought was, okay, we got a big bear coming in. Not uncommon with where we were. And we could hear it grunting. And you just heard it getting closer and closer. So I grabbed the bear mace and I was ready for whatever. And we're sitting there and I'm looking down the walkway and we hear a whoop back up the mountain behind us. Anya looked over, turns over her left shoulder because she was in driver's seat and looks back that way. And I kept looking down the path and there was about a 15-foot opening, and in a matter of 3 steps, this dark, huge, probably 7.5, 8-foot, massive thing on 2 legs cleared that opening in 3 steps and disappeared into the sagebrush on the other side. And I go, did you see that? And Anya goes, see what? No, I was looking back up. I go, we gotta go. She goes, what? I go, we need to go. She goes, what do you mean? And we hear out of what would have been my side of the car. I said, start the car, let's go. So she did. We started driving back, and she was like, what'd you see? And I'm like, I don't know. She goes, what do you mean? I go, and of course, I'm running through my head, Bigfoot, or not Bigfoot, I'm running through my head, black bear, moose. Running through my head, what's all the wildlife out there? And I go, it had to have been him. She goes, what do you mean? I go, I think I saw Bigfoot. She goes, what do you mean? I go, there is nothing in these woods that is that color and that size that would walk upright, that would clear that distance in that time and just absolutely disappear on there. I go, there's nothing else that it could have been but that. So a few weeks went by. It had gotten warmer, and we had adopted a husky at this point. And we went to go back out with a friend of ours, and we went back on the same trails, same area, and we didn't definitively see anything. And this was our last trip out because we were moving to Illinois and then subsequently ended up in Oklahoma, and now we're in Texas. But our buddy Nathan was with us, and every so often we would just see what looked about the same size height-wise. Figured just peek out from the trees and then pull back in, but that was all we ever saw. But when we'd go out there, like during the day or whatever, we'd go to certain places, and we'd be out there probably 10, 15 minutes. All of a sudden, we would just get a single, and that would be it. And we just keep what we were doing. It almost seemed to almost get to the point where we were out there so much that it knew we were there. And it was saying, I know you're here. I'm here. You're fine over there. You come over here and it's going to be a different story. That was our experience.
Were there any weird smells when you were out there ever?
Not really smells. I don't recall any strange smells. There were definitely strange noises, like birds that shouldn't be awake at night, that didn't quite sound like birds. There'd just be, we'd see shadows, like I said, poking out from between the trees and then going back. We found one area that I wish I'd have backed up the photos when I got my new phone, but there was one area where you came down this ravine and there was a bunch of really big ferns. I had massive leaves on them and everything. You get through them, and then there's this clearing where it looked like everything had been cleared down or cleared out, and there was a circle of stones, maybe 1.5 feet wide, with a stone in the middle, and then just one stick sticking straight up at the one end. And it just seems so out of place that we're well off the trail. There should be no reason why this would be here. And so I took photos of it, and then afterwards, and I can look through like old messenger messages, see if I can still find the photos. But afterwards, we were looking at it, and there were a couple places where when we went through the photos, you could almost see what looked like a footprint with the 5 toes and definitely a foot shape, and it just things like that. But that was really the one and only time that I at least saw something crystal clear that there's no way it would have been a black bear. A black bear would never get that tall. Even on its hind legs, it would never ever reach that height. And black bears don't walk on their hind legs in the wild. They don't. They'll raise up on them, they look around, but they don't move on their hind legs. There's nothing, a wolf would never be that big, wouldn't walk on its hind legs. If you saw a moose walking on its hind legs, please get it on video because that would be the funniest thing ever. But just
I love that. I would love it.
There's really just nothing out there that would have made sense to fit what I had seen.
No, absolutely. And so you're down in Texas now, you said, right?
Yeah, we're moving.
I'm sure you probably check the websites to see if the area you're in and other states have Bigfoot activity. And
I do. One place that we've gone, I think twice, was Goatman's Bridge, Old Alton Bridge.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
There was some weird feelings there, but never anything to me to definitively say those legends are true, there's something there or anything like that. I haven't gotten to go to Texarkana or Big Bend or anywhere like that, unfortunately. But where we're going in Oklahoma is out in the middle of nowhere. There's a bunch of woods around there. And I've never definitively seen anything there. But there was one night where Ani and I were standing at the edge of the driveway, and something on the other side of the road was big enough to be shaking the trees around there. And so something just was shaking the trees, and it was clearly we need to get out of here. We need to go back to the house. She had said that there'd be times where she'd hear something walking on the woods along the property, but we never definitively saw anything there.
Interesting. Yeah, you definitely keep your eyes out when you're in Oklahoma because all over the state, there's some weird stuff going on with Bigfoot and Dogman. But Shep, thanks for coming up. I appreciate you sharing what you guys experienced up there in Idaho.
Yeah, not a problem. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You got it. Hey, Outlaw, thanks for coming up.
You got me?
Yes, sir. Cool. So what brings you up, sir?
I'm at work, but I can tell you a story real quick. I actually live in Missouri, southeast Missouri, down around the Boot Hill area. I'm not going to give my actual location, but we're surrounded by national forestry, just thousands and thousands of miles of it. And I'm a hunter all my life. I've hunted, trapped, fish, all that my whole entire life, and my favorite thing to do is to bow hunt for whitetails. Me and a bunch of my buddies one year went on a hog hunt expedition. And I will tell you where we went. We went to Paddy Creek Conservation Area. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or not.
I haven't. No, I'm looking it up.
It's very kind of mountainous terrain and wilderness, just miles and miles. We never killed any hogs in the 3-day time that we was there. We saw a lot of sign, but I also saw lots of other activity of wildlife that you don't normally see around here too much. I found really big cat tracks, really big bear tracks, things of that sort, which I thought that was cool because that's just not something we see every day around here. And the area that we were hunting, we had to drive down this gravel road long ways, and it actually ended at the river. But every day when we went hunting, we would drive past this farm down this gravel road, and it looked like a pretty big farm, and this guy had a bunch of hog skulls on fence posts. So that tells me he's a hog hunter. And I thought about stopping and talking to him a few times while we were down there, but I didn't. You don't know people and you're out in the boonies. So it's just one of them deals. Our last day when we were leaving, I told the guys, I was like, I want to stop here and I want to go talk to this guy and ask him about these hogs. And that way, if we want to come back down here, we know where we're going and we're not just winging it. We stopped. I got out and I knocked on the door. He's an old guy. He's probably in his 70s or 80s at least. And he had 3 sons. They were all older, around my age, and they all ran the farm together. And he told me he had 1,200 acres or something. It was a ridiculous amount of land. And I asked him about, we were talking about hogs and stuff, but I told him, I was like, man, I bet you got some big deer in here. Oh yeah, we deer everywhere in here. He said, just me and my family is the only ones that hunts it. He said, nobody will even stop and ask me if they can hunt. He said, if people was to ask me if they could hunt on me, I'd tell them yes, because he said, they just eat my crops up. And I said, well, would you care if I picked a date and came down and maybe bow hunted on you? And he's like, oh no. He gave me his number and stuff, and really nice family. So bow season rolls around. I give the guy a call. He remembered who I was right off the bat. And we picked a weekend, and I drove all the way down. And they actually had a camper outside, a couple of campers, and he told me, he said, oh, we'll just plug one of the campers in. If you want to stay the night, you can stay in the camper. I said, oh, that sounds great. So I get down there and get all settled in and meet his wife and grandkids. We jump on the side-by-side, and he just starts taking me around this place. Like, we literally spent probably 4 hours driving around this farm, and he told me you could drive around the whole farm for 2 days and still not see everything. That's how big it was. And he took me to this one area. It's way back in the back, and nobody goes back there, and there's this great big river bottom field It's just full of grass. Like I guess they probably used it to cut hay is the only thing I can think of, because there wasn't any cattle back in that area. And I looked around and there was deer sign everywhere. That was my spot. And plus I was going to be way away from everybody else, so I wouldn't have to worry about bothering anybody or getting in cows coming in on me or anything like that. I have what's called a climbing stand at the time, and you basically just hook it on a straight tree with no limbs and climb it up. So I found me a good spot. There was like a bottleneck where trails were all coming together as one trail. Great spot. And it's right on the edge of this big, huge field. And this field's probably, it's probably 700-800 yards. Like you can see a long ways. And I had made a plan for the next day. I went out there and put my stand on the tree, so it was already there. And then marked my trail, so the next morning I could just walk straight in. I was going to do an all-day sit if I had to. So I get out there the next morning, and I sat there. I seen deer. It was an eventful day. There was just deer and wildlife galore, and it was a great time. And later in the evening, like afternoon, like once the sun started going down, I kept hearing this strange noise back in the woods behind me, like just brush popping, and every once in a while I'd hear what sounded like just somebody just taking a big limb and snapping it. And the problem was, back behind me, there was a little creek down the hill behind me somewhere, because I could hear it running. I could hear running water down there. But it was so brushy that I couldn't see behind me very good. My visibility was probably maybe 15 feet behind. It was bad, like a jungle. And this went on for an hour or two, and I wouldn't hear it for a little bit, and then all of a sudden I'd hear it sound like a big animal moving around back in there. Every once in a while I'd stand up and turn around and look that direction to see, because it sounded like I should be able to see it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it literally sounded like it was close enough to me out there that I should be able to see something, but there was just so much foliage and brush in my way, I couldn't see anything. And I had deer everywhere out in front of me out in this field. I'm trying to pay attention to everything all at the same time. And then so it getting closer and closer to darken, and then I can hear this thing. I heard it go across the water, because I could hear it walking in the gravel. And I could hear it like sloshing through the creek water. And by this time, it's coming up the hill straight towards me. And I'm like, what is going on? So I'm stood up and turned completely around backwards this time, just trying to see something. And every once in a while, I felt like I could see like movement of limbs or like the brush moving around. And I'm looking and it's coming. Like it literally sounds like it might have been 40 yards behind me by that point. And I'm looking, I can't see anything. I remember the wind changed on me, and the wind hit the back of my ears and was blowing straight in that direction. And the moment the wind swirled around and blew that direction, whatever it was just stopped and was standing there like a statue. Like I couldn't hear anything anymore. I couldn't hear it moving, couldn't hear nothing. It was just standing there. And I'm like, what in the world? And I've been in the woods all my life, and I've heard all kinds of animal sounds. I can usually identify everything I hear. But all of a sudden, and it gives me the willies every time I think about it. All of a sudden, this thing makes this vocalization. And I'll do it the best that I can to give you an idea of what it sounded like. But I can't do it exactly like it was a big animal, whatever it was, and it makes a sound like moo, just like that, only a lot. I can't go as deep as it did. And immediately I was just like, what was that? And it turned around and just tore down the hill. And I heard it jump in the creek, splash, splash, like I could hear it splash in the water. And it stood there again at the bottom of the hill. I knew it was in the water. And it made a blow sound almost. I think whatever it was smelled me when the wind changed. And then it ran down the hill real quick. And then when it was in the water, I think maybe it was down there trying to smell me again. And it took a deep breath and then blew it out. And then this thing takes off barreling through the woods. And here's the really weird part. So it makes this loud sound that I've never heard before, tears down the hill, and then once it took off running out of the creek, I hear almost identical sound behind me all the way across this whole valley, but it was a higher pitch. It was like a moo-wah, and it was a little like faster. It wasn't so moo-wah like the first one. And then I hear this moo-wah, and it's a little bit higher pitched, but that thing was probably 600-700 yards away across that field, and I heard it, and I was like, what was that? Is that something answering to this? And I listened to this thing run till it got completely out of earshot of me, and I got down and got out of there before it got too dark, because I did have a sidearm on me just in case I run into hogs or something. But it made me nervous because the only thing I had was just a 9mm, and then I had my bow. And I got down and I wrapped my stuff up and I took it back and got all the way back to the farm. And everybody seemed surprised. They thought maybe I had shot something and needed help getting a deer out or something. And I just, oh no, I just decided to get down early. I'm actually going to have to leave tonight. I decided I wasn't going to stay the night. I was just going for the one day, and that was all I wanted to do. I didn't want to stay the whole weekend. So I mentioned that I heard some strange sound, strange noise back there. And the old guy, oh, what do you mean strange noise? And I told him the story.
He knew.
He just giggled about it, and then one of the sons was in the kitchen at the time when we were talking about this. And he said, which area was you at? And I told him the area of the farm that I was hunting on. And he just goes, yeah, I'm not surprised. And then his mom, the old guy's wife, whispered something in the son's ear, and then they're going back and forth. But the old man's talking to me, so I'm trying to pay attention to what he's saying. And he just blew it off. Oh, yeah, we're out here in the middle of nowhere, so you got all kind of animals out here. There really ain't no telling what it was. But all my life I've been in the woods and still do to this day, and I'll keep doing it until I can't go anymore. And I've yet to ever hear whatever that sound was ever again. And I never went back. That was like back in probably 2010 or something. Never contacted him. I'm sure the old guy's passed away and everything by now, for sure. But I never went back. But they acted very strange when I was talking about it. They didn't laugh it off like it was a joke. They just laughed like giggling.
Yeah.
Like, we heard that weird sound. But the thing was, there was two of whatever it was, because that other one, it was not an echo all the way across the valley. We're talking about probably 40 seconds. This all took place, not even a minute.
Okay.
And when this other one answered back behind me, like I said, it was a higher pitched sound, but it was the same sound. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
No, absolutely. It definitely shows there was more than one there.
I'm telling you right now, I walked out of that place watching over my shoulder
Absolutely.
all the way till I got back to
Wow.
the four-wheeler. I was just looking behind me, and I've never to this day ever heard that sound again. But I never seen anything. I really wish that I could have at least seen what it was. I don't know that it was a Sasquatch, but it was a big animal, whatever it was.
They knew what was there and they weren't talking about it. So if it's not Sasquatch, it was something else weird that they didn't want to come out in the open with.
Yeah, none of them told me what it could be or anything like that. They didn't make any suggestions. They're just, oh yeah, you. And then one of the boys, one of his other sons, he was like, yeah, every time I got to go over there and cut hay, I hear weird shit out there at night and this and that. And he said, there ain't no, we got big cats around here and blah, blah, blah. I guess that's a suggestion, but it was not a cat. There's no way that it was a big cat. This thing, well, the bass in this thing's voice, like the only thing that I could think of is possibly a bear, but we don't have big bears around here. Our bears are not like the bears up north. They're little black bears and honey bears and stuff. We don't have no 400 or 500 pound brown bears or anything like that. And I don't know, I've kind of always wanted to go back and just check things out a little more, but I haven't. I don't even have their phone number anymore, and I wouldn't even really know exactly how to get to the place again. So,
Oh man, what a story. What an account. Thank you for sharing that. That is incredible. Thank you for sharing.
yeah, thanks for having me, man.
All right, it gets you a little break off of work too. So thanks for coming up.
Yeah, I got to get back to work, actually. I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you too. Thanks for chatting, man.
Yeah.
Hey there, thanks for coming up. You're welcome to share what you've experienced.
I didn't really expect to do this. I was just eating and scrolling.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
I'm a spiritual type of person, I guess you could call it. 2011. I don't know how to explain it because I try to be careful with my words and nomenclatures, but I would call it a spiritual awakening or a consciousness awakening or whatever in 2011. And so with that said, I had started tapping into esoteric, Gnostics, meditation, yoga, shamanic breathing and journeying, Reiki. And for some reason, I intuitively became obsessed, or I want to say obsessed, but I couldn't stop staring at the stars looking for whatever, just because something just landed in me. And needless to say, I started having a lot of shooting stars, orbs, visits. I actually had an experience against my will. I'm not, an abduction, and probably more than one. But
Oh, sure.
the thing about that is that I was in Reiki energy. I was learning, I was studying all kinds of stuff. The spiritual awakening, conscious awakening, whatever you want to call it, was during that time. It started in 2011, October 2011 to January of 2012 was like the beginning of all that. And it's still going on to this very day. So with the Sabe, because I don't like to call them Bigfoot, that'd be like calling you or me like Four Eyes, right? Because I wear glasses. It's just that derogatory, lack of better understanding, filtered word. Bigfoot, I feel, is just a ridiculous name to call them, because the Native Americans, they call them the Sabe.
Mm-hmm.
And they are one of our 7 grandfathers. And they represent honesty, not truth, but honesty. But with that said, I was having a night with some plant medicine. I was doing some very intensive intending, setting. I went out with my substance out in the yard, and it was nighttime. And I had been star watching and orb searching and whatnot for months. And my mom had started watching I think it was Animal Planet, had that Finding Bigfoot or something like that. But I was like with my mom, I was enthralled. It was like one of the first things they started throwing out there to give us some kind of sense of stuff. It only took me about 2 shows to realize that the show was garbage. But the thing about it is, so I had a reverence, a love, a curiosity about them, because I have seen and experienced paranormal, supernatural things randomly throughout my life, and not really realized what it was till after, with hindsight. But I was in South Carolina at the time, and this was 2011, 2012, right at the beginning of 2012. I was outside with my plant medicine, with set and setting intention to connect with, and that was the thing, I was vague in my conscious affirmation of connecting. So I wasn't really particular on what I was going to connect with. And super long story short, I connected with a few different entities or aspects of reality, if you will. And one of them was the Sabe. And I was in my experience for hours and hours dealing with some other cryptids, if you will. But it was very spiritual. Okay, you got to keep in mind this was a very spiritually encompassed and intended and energetic, conscious place I was in, mentally, consciously, physically. I was just emotionally. Everything was about connecting consciously to whatever it was I was spiritually waking up to, or consciously waking up to, because I think spirituality and consciousness is the same thing, if you will. And during this night, I had a couple different experiences with there's quite a few experiences I had with this night. But when I got, and I probably should just go through the whole story, but it's lengthy. I could probably try to boil it down a little bit, but I will. Because we need that backstory. I think it's important because it all goes together with the experience, I think, because of where I consciously was. But I'll try to break it down and summarize it. I was dealing with an entity, if you will, but this was the first time that it was a very shamanic, spiritual, and it wasn't just a recreational colors and breathing and like just the normal stereotypical baseline recreational experience. This was way different, my first way different shamanic kind of experience. And I started dealing with a entity of some sort that I believe to be like, I call them Squiddy from the Matrix, because they were like the Sentinels, but and the texture, but this thing was made out of light. I also called it Squiddy because it had tentacles that looked biomechanical. It was luminescent, and they morphed, and it was floating around in the sky, like one of the Marvel movies when the creatures came out and was swimming through our atmosphere as if it was water. It's a very similar aspects, which I saw that after this experience. So it's not like my brain put it together and created something that I couldn't handle. But as I dealt with this thing, I was interacting with it and felt that it was a malevolent type of thing. And a few weeks before, or a week before, I was on a small microdose, and I was looking up at the stars, and I said, you could use me. But I wasn't very specific with that either. So for anybody listening, our intentions, conscious intentions, are very important, especially tied to our dialogue. Okay. And I learned this the hard way.
Exactly. Yep.
So with that said, I was dealing with this entity thing, and I went into the bathroom because I spent hours dealing with this thing, telepath talking to it. And it was funny because when I finally, after a few hours, I told it with my actual mouth, I'd say, no, I could see you. And it changed shape, and it was almost like a windshield came down. Like when you roll your driver's side window down, I saw this face. It had like 2 eyes, a brow, forehead. And that's when I realized that this Squiddy thing I'd been talking to was some kind of exoskeleton suit, or I don't know, but it showed me that it had this humanoid bipedal type face, like eyes, nose, forehead. That startled me. That threw me off a little bit, because this whole time I had naively thought that I was talking to this squiddy lobster face bioluminescent thing that was just floating around. And it was open eye and closed eye. So this was an experience. It wasn't a hallucination, which I really don't like that term hallucination, but because we are consciously having an experience as an observer through all aspects of altered states, if you will. But so this thing is starting to really bother me because it starts showing me a little more. I hate to say this because I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. But it reminded me of a satanic kind of, it started showing me like the Necronomicon sign, the pentagram sign on its chest as it was trying to communicate with me because I was trying to find out who it was, what did it want. And it started a little more nefarious. So I went to the bathroom and I'm looking in the mirror. I'm like, who are you? Where are you right now? And I felt my body vibrate really hot. It got really hot and it was vibrating. And I looked down. I was looking in the mirror. I looked down at my hand. When I looked back up, my reflection I had shape shifted into something that I had a black. My eyes were solid black. I had a third eye on my forehead. I can't believe I'm finally telling this story like out in public. This has only been heard by a few friends. But I felt it happen. Like I felt the heat and the vibration. And I looked at my hand and it looked normal. And I looked back up and I was this thing. It had like goat horns, but they were really tight to my head. My head had curly, woolly kind of hair. I had like a cat or cow like nose or whatever, but the eyes is what caught me. Everything else, the details were like peripheral recording, but I couldn't stop looking at the third eye on my forehead. It was just in my eyes, all three of them, they're just black. And that scared me. So I went to the living room, laid down on the floor, spread eagle, which I found out 2 weeks later through my studies. That was a shamanic grounding, right? So I did that just out of instinct and laid there for a minute. And I was just like thinking like nobody's gonna be able to, I can't tell this to nobody. Like I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I was already trying to wrap my head around the 4-hour experience I had with Squiddy. So I go outside on the back porch. And at this time, my relatives, my sister, they were having a hard time with depression and just hard times. Job was stressful, this, that, and the other. And so I had assumed this Squiddy thing was like her demon or something, right? And didn't even think that it was my attachment or whatever. But I looked up in the sky and just, I believe it was Archangel Michael that I called on. Could have been Metatron. I was just getting into all the archangels at the time. And I called out and said I would just be talking to you or talking to my dad or talking to just some person. I was like, hey, I need you to protect my family because this thing, I thought this Squiddy thing was theirs. And because of the depression and level of low vibrations she was in at the time. So I called on an archangel and an archangel flew over me immediately. I jumped. It startled me because I thought it was like a shooting star or a crashed. I don't know how to explain it, but a ball of white light that looked like a bullet tip with a little black silhouette in it shot right above my head over the house. And an immense feeling of serenity and peace. I just started crying tears of worthiness in all of the self-inflicted sabotage belief that we're not worthy because we're all been groomed and conditioned to not know who we are, where we came from, and our divinity that's within us. And I was learning this at the time through this awakening phase. And so I was in tears and thinking, why, like me, like I'm experiencing this. This was something totally different, but I was also a different person consciously in vibration because I was finding conscious spirituality or whateverness, right? And I've been doing the work instead of just sitting around being 3D. So I'm trying to wrap my head around this and I'm just in tears, but in joy. And I'm really feeling the peace and serenity. And I realized in this feeling, I just sat down for a minute and I realized the Squiddy thing was gone. Even the heaviness, it was gone. And when I'm looking around, the atmosphere was different. Everything looked different. The nighttime bugs, it's probably 3, 4 in the morning. Nighttime bugs, everything just was like, I want to say divine. It was like for a moment, if what I feel, it was like heaven on earth in that moment. I don't know how to explain it. It was just, it brought me humble, gratuitous tears. And I felt, I don't know how to explain how I felt, but it was awesome. And so I sat down and I realized Squiddy was gone, and I closed my eyes and it was gone. My open eye was gone. He was just gone. It was gone. This thing was gone. And I just sat there trying to wrap my head around this whole night and all of these celestial, supernatural, paranormal things that I've been experiencing for the last 6 hours or so, right? And as I'm sitting there in gratitude, trying to figure out how this moment right now would come about, where I would actually tell more than one person and not worry about feeling crazy, or because this happened in 2011. It's been a while since I've had a lid on this. But sitting there contemplating like how I was going to tell this story, if I was going to tell this story, do I even believe this is happening? Like, just because you could probably use your imagination. Would be hard to wrap your head around having this experience for the last 6 hours. And I'm sitting there on the back deck and I'm just in gratitude. And I look up to my right and I see this rainbow orb star that just doesn't look like a star. It's way too close. It's way too low to the tree line. It's not up in the atmosphere with the rest of these stars, because I am a self-proclaimed expert at look out in the stars at this point, right? Because it's been months and months that I've been doing this and having a lot of interactions with orbs and whatnot. And I'm looking at this star thingy, and I say to it in my conscious voice, "You're not a star." And as soon as I said that, I saw these little, like the eye shine when your eyes are wet. Cartoons, you do the little white star for the glimming teeth or the wet of the eyes, the shine. I saw these little shines. They were like a green light. They were shooting off into the backyard, into the trees, which it didn't make sense at the time. And I didn't really notice that, oh, look at those lights. It was like an afterthought when I'm retracing this whole experience the next day. I was like, those lights. But there was like 4 or 5 little lights that kind of just shot from the direction of that. They shot it to the backyard woods, and I really didn't put much thought into it till after the fact, but I'm just staring out into the woods, just thinking this whole experience, just trying to wrap my head around all of this, because it was one thing after another. It was a Squiddy, and then it was for hours, and then it was this shape-shifting, and then it was like, go out and pray, and then this angel showed up immediately when I asked it to protect my mom and my sister, my family. And now I'm just sitting here, and I look up in the sky, and there's this thing that's not a star, it's not a plane, it's just sitting there, and it's orbiting in like rainbow colors. I'm going to say it was like, I'm colorblind, but it was very distinct. It was the blue and red I could see, and maybe like yellowish, gold, or white, like the Native American medicine wheel colors, actually, now that I just thought of it. Wow. But yeah, something like that. And then these lights shooting down, but they were very subtle. They were very faint, but it was just the way they shot down from the direction of this star down into the backyard. And so I'm sitting there just in gratitude, in shock and disbelief, in belief, because I know what I've just experienced for the last 6 hours. And all of a sudden, there's a whistle. Then there's another whistle. And there's 4 or 5, oh, I'm getting chills, 4 or 5 different whistles say like off to like from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock in my periphery, from my periphery, my 9 o'clock to my 3 o'clock throughout the woods in different directions. There's these 4 or 5 whistles. And I'm sitting there, and now all of a sudden I'm snapped back into reality. I'm like, okay, wait, there's whistles out in the wood. And I draw my attention. And now as soon as I draw my attention to the 5th whistle, I'm listening now, right? I'm on super hearing. All of a sudden, I get the infamous tree knock. And I was like, no way. And I just went smile from ear to ear. And all I could think about was go wake up your mom, because she's got to know, because she loves Bigfoot, right? 70 years old. She loves Bigfoot. Who wouldn't? But I'm grinning ear to ear, and now I'm just like, I'm shocked. I heard the tree knock. After the 5 whistles, after the little shooting lights, after this whole night, and I'm just sitting here, this is the way this is happening. I'm never going to be able to tell this to anybody. Nobody's going to believe me. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like contemplating, go in the house. No, because then they'll leave. They'll think I'm scared. And I didn't really wrap my head around their mind speak abilities. Nobody said that yet. In my collecting understanding or information about Bigfoot back then, I hadn't known nothing about mind speak, but they absolutely mind speak. They absolutely are interdimensional. They absolutely can cast emotions onto us. They absolutely, because I've experienced all of this with them. But the thing was, is when I started smiling ear to ear, and they were quiet, like, and every sound, even the wind, stopped moving. Like there was no sound anywhere.
Yep.
The entire atmosphere just went into a vacuum, and I'm waiting to hear something else, but I can't stop feeling the excitement. And it was really a joy. It wasn't fear at all. It was excitement. I was like, no way. Like, yes. Because I mean, I've been sitting here wrapping my head around this whole night anyways. Like this was just a cherry on top. And I'm sitting here like, just in gratitude that they're even there. And I say they because the lights and the whistles, I put it together immediately. There's a group of them. And so with that, I was like consciously mind speak talking like why, how, like me, this, that, now like I just, and then off to my right behind me. Now this deck I was on, the back deck, or the house was on a slope. The back deck, you could actually drive the riding lawnmower under and get off of it and park it under the deck at the highest point. And the lowest point, you probably have to just, I'm 5'11", I probably have to duck a little bit, maybe put my ear to my shoulder, but not really bend over. So the steps were right behind me, and the kitchen window and back door were to my back. Immediately out the back door, you take a right and go down the steps. So immediately come out the back door and take a few steps and turn to the right. I'm sitting there on the deck. Right behind me, I start hearing what I thought it was the HVAC unit at first, but there's absolutely no sound at all in the atmosphere. Everything stopped. It was quiet. And all of a sudden I start hearing this breathing, growling, and it's right behind me. I could turn around and touch his face or hers with I could, and I knew this. I knew it was literally right behind me. And I'm not gonna lie, I wanted to turn around, but I couldn't. I could not, and I still regret that to this day that I did not turn around and look at it. But it's almost like it knew that's what I was thinking, and I felt this: you will have a heart attack and die of shock immediately if you turn around and look at this thing in the face.
Wow.
That was the knowing I had. That was the suggestion that I had adopted, accepted, like that came into my first instinct was you'll die of a heart attack of shock if you turn around and look at this thing. And so I didn't.
Right.
I'm just being honest. I didn't, man. I kicked myself because I feel like that was a test of fear. Because now as a spiritual conscious person, fear is the enemy, and fear is false evidence appearing real, if you will, or whatever. Like fear is the mind killer. So I think that was a test to my fear, but I also feel like it was in honor of its wish, its will. It's don't look at me, but
right.
I don't know. I'm still trying to work that out. I'm still trying to understand what that is, but yeah, I didn't turn around and look at it. And so having that fear come over me in that moment, I went to the only mechanism I knew, which was gratitude. The only way to, at that time, the way I understood how to transmute fear was gratitude. So I went into lotus pose in my chair. I went into my little meditation. I'm also a Reiki channeler. So I channeled up and I went into a little mantra of thank you so much for blessing me with your presence, allowing me to be in this same space. I went into this whole little hokey pokey little like gratitude, humble gratitude mantra because I was shaking. Like I would, my DNA was shaking. My cells were shaking. Everything was just like, and it was fear, but it was excitement. I really don't think, and I don't think the fear was mine. I think it was, I think it was projected. And I've heard stories before. Everything I experienced, other people experience the same thing. These people have experienced the same stuff, like mind speak. Because this has happened. I said I had 2 experiences, but really it was 3. But one, it was just a day I was contemplating. I went out the next day, or the next evening. I went out the next day after this happened, because the property is real wooded, real thick. And I went out there to look for prints and stuff. I wanted to see where they were standing, because I went out to the areas where I heard the whistles, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I didn't find anything. I couldn't find anything, which started making me like, okay, now I'm experienced with plant medicine, so I'm like, now this wasn't just made up. Like this, I experienced these things because I didn't even get the normal patterns and colors and all, like the generic experience. I didn't have none of that. Like the whole time. So I was like, okay.
Oh,
this,
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, like this, it wasn't a stereotypical baseline recreational experience. This was way different. And now I have to be careful. I got to be very active on purpose and in alignment, very ceremonial now, which that's another thing, is that this experience brought me the respect and awareness of respect and gratitude and intention as ceremony whenever I ingest anything now, even my food. So I looked out in the woods. I didn't see nothing. But here, let's trace back. So he breathes. It's growling. It's breathing. But it wasn't like an intimidation growl. It was almost like he couldn't help it. But I feel like,
Right.
I take that back. I feel like it was intentional. It was like, because to hear somebody 2 feet away from you breathing, I don't know how to explain it, but I could tell how big this thing was. Like he was, just the depth, the guttural sound of the breathing, and the growl was very, almost like a tiger purr. Like it wasn't like, I'm gonna eat you. It was like, I don't know, but he got my attention, because at first I thought it was the HVAC system, but the HVAC system was around the other side of the house to the left. I heard this right here behind my right ear, and it gave me chills. I went into hearing the growl, wanting to turn around and look at him in the face, and I couldn't. I could not look him in the face. I went into fear, so I went into gratitude. I went into lotus. I went into gratitude. I went into my mantra, and all of a sudden, in that mantra, I started hearing the leaves blow in the wind. I started hearing the trees. I started hearing nature. I started hearing the stars. I heard regular reality again. And I had a whiff of some stink. I turned around, and there was nothing there. And I was like,
Wow.
how am I going to explain this? So I go back out in the woods the next day, and I don't see nothing. And this, I'm trying to contemplate all of this stuff that happened to me that night before. So it's dark again, and I go out and I start looking at nighttime to see if I could hear anything. Nothing. So 2 or 3 days go by. And I'm still wrapping my head around this whole experience. It took me months to not think about this all day long, every day. Okay. But it's like a week later, I think it was, I went outside and I was just sitting out in the yard, sitting out there in the blue rock crush and run you put in your driveways. And I was stacking rocks, right? Stacking these rocks, just making little stacked rocks and just thinking about all of this. And all of a sudden I started hearing these little rocks being like thrown. And I was like, really wasn't paying attention to it at first. Like the 3rd or 4th one, I was like, wait a minute. And so I'm hearing something. I'm thinking, okay, there's a fox or something, whatever. And I look around, and it's not walking. There's rocks hitting the driveway and bouncing. And I'm like, okay. And I look up out into the backyard, or out in the woods, just right. I'm in the front of the house by the driveway, which is the right side of the house, which is where I first expected the HVAC unit to be, but I was like, no, that's not it. And off into the woods, I see him standing there. He's standing there. It's just a big silhouette, and he's standing there. He's probably 50 yards away, 30 feet away, 40 feet away, right there in the trees. And I look up, and now I'm going back to the night a week ago, and I'm like, this is a real thing. And now he's back, and he's throwing rocks at me. And the intuition I had was come out there, go to him. And my 3D ego was like, no, we're not going nowhere, dude. I'm sitting right here, right? And I'm looking, and I think when I just made up my mind internally, my internal dialogue was like, I'm still wrapped in fear. Like, I was like, no, I'm not going out there. Even though I felt, and I think it was later, I had the epiphany that he was trying to call me out there. But in the moment, I was just like, there's no way. But here's the thing. These are pine trees, okay? Most of them are pine trees out in the woods. This pine tree, he walked behind a tree. And I'm telling you, this tree was 8-10 inches wide. It was not big enough for him to hide behind. But as he stepped behind this tree, he disappeared. Like, just gone. He's too wide to hide behind this one tree, but when he stepped behind this tree, he never came out the other side of it.
Went somewhere, yeah.
And I was just like,
Wow.
there's no way. Then I'm still sitting out there, and I heard something about probably 10, 20 feet-ish off to the right of where he just disappeared behind a tree in the woods, but very faint. And I'm just thinking, and at this time, my mom comes out of the house. She comes out to smoke a cigarette, and I'm like, Mom, it's back. It's out there right now. Because I told her the next day, her and my sister they're like, dude, you're crazy. You've gone crazy, dude. You know, UFOs, Bigfoot, come on, man. She comes out, she sits down, she lights her cigarette. I'm like, no, Mom, like, for real. And then my dog comes to the door and taps on the door. So she opens the door, and my dog runs immediately. She doesn't thank you, Mom. She doesn't come to me. She makes a beeline to where this thing is at out in the woods and starts barking and barking. She gets out to where he was and stops barking. And immediately I'm like, okay. And I call her, and I start walking out there, and she comes running back towards me, shaking her tail as if she just did something good. She just ran off the boogeyman. And I was just like, this thing could, I didn't really know who they were, what they were at the time. Like I do now. I used to tell everybody, yep, she knows Bigfoot. And I know I'm being hypocritical. I'm saying I shouldn't call him Bigfoot, but the Sabe are absolutely our brothers to a degree. And if you want to believe in the Nephilim and the hybrids, cryptids that are all over this planet that we're not told about from the fallen and all of that, I do believe in a creator. I do believe in the firmament. I do believe in our divinity. And the whole reason we're here experiencing this is to come back to remembering, to realization that we are a little tiny piece of God, that we are that divinity, experiencing life, experiencing experience for the divine, of the divine. We're all connected. Everything is from that same creation. So they absolutely can throw feeling into you. They can, and this is the thing, that night, after my dog came back, I made my mom put her in the house, and I was even like, look, I told you he's out there, because she ran out there. That wasn't normal for the dog. And my mom was like, when I told her, I was like, look, she just went out where I told her she was. And she looked at me with this face like, maybe you're not crazy, because she's now experiencing a reality that she just witnessed the dog do something out of norm, out of character, and run off into the woods exactly where I just told her I saw Bigfoot walk behind a tree. So now she's, maybe he's not crazy, but now she's trying to wrap her head around the unknown reality. But I had went out there after, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go out there. Because I thought for a minute, well, what if there's somebody at the neighbors? What if the neighbors are out in the woods or something? Like, who knows? And so I went out there, and as I was walking around, I was talking in my head to myself, but to them, because now I've adopted a mantra and meditation and inner dialogue prayer. Because I'm not like the church kind of prayer. It's sometimes I do, but it's, you want to close your eyes and look down into your heart when you pray. Because meditation is, praying is asking, speaking, and meditation is listening, shutting up and listening. The way I feel it. So I'm talking to them, and I'm like, how and what? Like my experience, why, and thank you. But I was all like, as big and scary and obviously from us. And what came to my mind was, you guys are dangerous. You're ignorant and dangerous. But we are a beautiful creature. We just have been lied to and misled and conditioned. And he said that it's going to take some work to get out of it, but you can. And we're not going to sit down with you until you do. Like, we can't we got to watch you. This is basically the message I got from them. Like, they hide from us because we're dangerous. We're ignorant. We're foolish. We're greedy. We're disrespectful to our land, to our nature, to each other, to ourselves. And now I'm feeling heavy-hearted, but this is a message people need to hear. We need to wake up and step into our divinity and start having compassion, empathy, love, forgiveness, unconditional love, not just Valentine's Day love, unconditional love. I still love you because you're in a process of remembering and learning. Going against a groomed programming of being disconnected and lost and not knowing who we are in a divine way. Like, we're, So yeah, his message was like, why would Bigfoot, why would something that big and that supernatural hide from us? Look at us. Look at what we do to each other in our planet. Like, I would hide from us too. So yeah, that's, wow. Thank you for sharing this platform, because I had 2 other people invite me or ask me if I would share this, and I don't know. And I have no, today has been a really strong Reiki day, a lot of prayers and meditations, and I don't know. I saw you. I guess what I would like people to take from this is that they're not monsters, but there are good and bad everything. Well, there's good and bad angels. There's good and bad animals. There's good and bad fish. Probably not fish. I don't know. But you know what I'm getting at.
I get
the
it.
duality exists. And
I guess I have one question for it. Are you able to share the general area where all this took place?
yeah, this was in St. Matthews, South Carolina at the time.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
But thank you for coming up and for sharing what you experienced. It means a lot that you're able to
Absolutely.
trust this group to share with us what you experienced. And thank you for coming up. It's been a pleasure spending some time with you, and thank you for sharing, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Here at Bigfoot Society, our goal is to provide a platform for those that have encountered Bigfoot to share their encounter in a safe and respected environment. But we need to hear your story. If you've experienced something that you just can't explain, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Then we can start the conversation. And I know a lot of you have not shared your encounter at all. It's been 20 years, and it's time that you get this off your chest, and then you can get some well-deserved rest, because I know you haven't been sleeping. I understand what you're going through, and I appreciate every one of you listening.
Bigfoot Society podcast, hosted by our captain, Jeremiah Byron, where it's all Bigfoot all the time. Have you ever had the urge to do more, to be more? Now you can by joining Bigfoot Society on the Patreon. Get ad-free episodes and even member-only episodes. Take part in movie night and even live video chats. Interact behind the scenes with Jeremiah and other Patreon members like me, Slaya. The powerful podcast goes on, and you may contribute a verse in our Patreon community. Carpe diem. Seize the day, Bigfooters, and make your lives extraordinary.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list.
These are all in Oregon, by the way. Oak Ridge, Dexter, Fall Creek, Deschutes National Forest area, Cultus Lake, Spirit Lake, Subtle Lake, McKenzie River area, Sweet Home area, the area west of Crater Lake, east of 230 West Diamond Lake Highway, and north of 62 Crater Lake Highway.
You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.